Welcome everyone to SEL 4NJ's SEL Week School Showcase webinar series. We're really excited to be able to bring to you 4 days, 9 webinars in total from just amazing presenters. And I am Liz Warner. I am the current standing president of SEL 4NJ, and SEL Day and SEL Week is always just such a wonderful, wonderful, exciting time to celebrate all the amazing work that all doing. So what we're going to do is give you just a brief introduction about SEL Day in case you don't know, and then we're going to turn the proceedings directly over to Dr. Marisa Elias and Alisha DeLorenzo, who's going to be just really inspiring us on some very important topics. So SEL Day is on Friday, March 8th. If you haven't signed up already, really encourage you to do so. It's selday.org, and it's full of a lot of amazing resources and just great ideas for SEL Day. SEL Day is brought to you by a partnership between SEL for US, the Urban Assembly, 6 Seconds, who's the international partner, and then SEL for NJ, who you're with here today. Just for those of you who may not be aware, SEL 4NJ is an affiliate of SEL 4US. SEL 4US, as you can see from the map, spans our country from coast to coast, and including the Midwest. So it's an alliance that is growing and is really very in tune with each state's sort of individual personalities, but at the same time, every state is really focused on advocating for, connecting, on supporting great SEL work. Here in New Jersey, which is great, all of you are here today. We've been an organization as SEL 4NJ since 2018, and we have over 2,600 members, and we really are always growing. And what's kind of a little unusual but incredibly special about SEL 4NJ is it includes educators, it includes SEL providers, and associations and community partners, all advocating and promoting best practice SEL. So that's kind of what I have been saying. So I'm not going to spend too much more time on that. Oops, sorry. So what is SEL Day? The idea about SEL Day, it started 4 years ago, actually. You can see this is from the second SEL Day. We were all in quarantine on the very first SEL Day, but it's a way to celebrate the importance of SEL, and very importantly, to celebrate the great work all of you are doing in your schools. And one of the ideas is that to have a week, a day, where everyone talks about it and shares, and just this wonderful uplifting of positivity happens. So it's great that you're with us. We thought we would extend it to SEL Week because there was just so much to do on SEL Day itself. So it's wonderful you're here. A way to support it, well, last year it's grown and grown and grown and grown. We have state proclamations, 88 countries. This year, 6 Seconds is an international partner. You can see the impact has just been huge. And what's really neat, I know many of you are from New Jersey. New Jersey has always been one of the most active participants. So it's great to be able to share the great work going on in New Jersey as well. So how to celebrate, create an artifact and share it on social media. All sorts of things, or as small as you would like. It doesn't involve money necessarily or speakers in your schools, but really just create something and share it. And we are so excited to be able to provide you the speakers free of charge. And we're so grateful to all of our wonderful speakers who are participating this week. So SEL Day, lots of resources on selday.org. So today, on to the meat of our time together. We're going to be hearing, as mentioned before, from Alisha DeLorenzo, who is just the most fascinating, inspiring speaker. And then later on this afternoon, a really important topic, SEL and special education. And then those of you who've probably seen the list, we have a whole lineup of 7 additional webinars happening Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. So check out our website, check out wherever you registered for this. So with that said, I am going to turn this over to Dr. Maurice Elias, who's going to introduce Alisha. So over to you, Maurice. I will stop sharing my screen.
Great. Thanks, Liz. I'm Maurice Elias. I'm on the leadership team of SEL for US, SEL for NJ, and the Academy for SEL in Schools. And as we kick off SEL for NJ's series of webinars related to Social and Emotional Learning Week for 2024, we could not have a better opening keynote than Alisha DeLorenzo. Alisha is founder and CEO of Living Yes, LLC. Amidst all the tension and divisiveness in the world today, Alisha DeLorenzo sees the positive possibilities. She believes the way to do the most with what we have is to unlock the next level of aliveness in people. As you will hear, Alisha has a profound understanding of the human spirit and social emotional learning and how to redefine schools, communities, and individual lives. She will speak about the connection of social emotional learning to the science and psychology of mattering. Alisha is in demand as a speaker and consultant nationally and internationally. Her work has been featured on PBS, NBC, Spotlight News, and elsewhere. And in 2023, she received the prestigious Ernest L. Boyer Outstanding Educator Award. And we have her right here, right now. Get ready for the energy, the insight, the inspiration, and the magic of Alisha DeLorenzo.
Thank you so much, Dr. Elias, SEL for NJ, for this invitation and the partners included in making this week so special. I was so thrilled to get this invitation to kick off the week and to really start to, build our curiosity about where do we go from here. SEL has been so critical to the way we educate for as long as we've been educating, but where do we go from here? How do we expand this idea and practice and curiosity around SEL, and I couldn't be happier. So I appreciate the invitation, and I'm excited to be with all of you here today. I really feel like I'm amongst giants, in this field and doing this work. And I know that those of you who are boots on the ground, doing the innovative work of making SEL what it is, the essence, like just how we show up and how we engage people are the true heroes in the field. So let's get ready to just enjoy each other, to have some fun, and to bring some new ways of thinking around SEL and the science and psychology of mattering, which to me is so compelling. So to begin in SEL fashion, let's start with a self-regulation practice. So if you would go ahead, and if you're able to, put your feet flat on the ground, lengthen up through your spine. Allow your shoulder blades to drop back. I don't know what it took for you to get here today, but let's just tap inwards to our bodies and our collective energy. So if you're comfortable closing your eyes, you can do that. If not, just go ahead and set your gaze down. This will just be a few minutes for us to get centered and grounded with each other. So with your eyes closed or your gaze down, I want you to really start to feel that groundedness from your feet, right? Like really feeling the support underneath you, whether that's the chair below you or the ground beneath you. And as you breathe into this space, I want you to think about the ways that you are supported and grounded in your knowledge, in your experience, in your wisdom, in what you bring to schools and children everywhere. And as we take this next deep breath in, I want you to breathe into the back part of your body. If you could imagine breathing into the back of your lungs and the back of your body, this represents everything that's come before us, everything that's made us who we are, every experience that we've had that has really shaped us as an educator and as a person. And I want you to breathe into all of those experiences. In fact, breathe into our ancestors who've paved the path for us, the pioneers in education who have paved this path for us, that have come before us, that have set us up so uniquely positioned to show up fully in this moment. With your next deep breath, I want you to breathe into the front side of your body. And breathing into the front of your body, we bring attention to what's ahead of us, the opportunities, the possibilities, everything that is uncertain and unseen in front of us, but all that is to come and all that is our potential to grow into. Breathe into this part of your body and feel that hope starting to bubble up within you. With your next breath, I want you to breathe into your side body, breathe into your ribs and your rib cage, and just start to create this expansiveness in your body. And allow that expansiveness to start to spread from your little box on the screen to the two people on the side of you, and then the people above and below you. And start to breathe into this kind of collective space for all of us. This is the place that represents our interconnectedness, our shared efforts, our collective capacity to create change and cultures of belonging and well-being for young people and adults that serve young.
The Joneses is somebody, another.
And taking your last full deep breath, just notice what that feels like to collectively come together in this energy.
No, none of these up here.
And if you aren't muted yet, please mute. So when you're ready, you can begin to open your eyes, wiggle your fingers, wiggle your toes. And I would hope for this to be as interactive as possible. So go ahead and put up in the chat one word that would describe something that you're bringing into this session, something that feels alive in you right now. What is the one word? Go ahead, put it up in the chat. We'll see. Yes, hope. Thank you, Michelle. Creativity. Yeah, calmness, curiosity. How incredible to start this week with those feelings, vision, those emotions, connectiveness, hope, and faith. I mean, if we can't start SEL week off with this intention, then I don't know what we could do. So I'm so grateful that you're bringing these things to our session today. I want to share a story with you to kick off our SEL week. And I want to ask you to be open to what's possible here and just present to this story. At first, it might not make a lot of sense why I'm sharing this story, but I promise you the clarity that you seek by the end of our session together, it will all make sense how important and valuable this work is. So the story I'm going to share is a story that is rooted in and takes place in Vietnam in the 90s. In the 90s in Vietnam, there was a tremendous trouble that communities were facing. And that trouble was that over 75% of children in the villages in Vietnam were malnourished. Two really special people, Monique and Jerry Sternin, a couple from the United States, were invited to Vietnam to tackle this problem, to come up with a solution. And the very difficult part here was that they only had 6 months to do it. So you could imagine the pressure that was on Jerry and Monique to make a change here. And what they did when they got to Vietnam was that instead of looking at the problem as overwhelming as malnourishment could be for 75% of the community, they shifted their focus, they shifted their attention to what was working. Now, I'm not a mathematician by any means, but if 75% of the community was malnourished, that meant that 25% of the community's children were nourished. And Jerry and Monique turned their focus there, to the successful few, the folks who were doing something just a little bit different and getting better results despite having the same access and the same resources. And what came next was a process later designed and named positive deviance. They looked at these positive deviants, these 25% of families, and they started to build deep relationships with them. They went to their homes and they started to observe, what were they doing that was so different? How were they getting these better outcomes? And what was it that was happening in their homes that was different than in the others? And they discovered a few things. In particular, they discovered that there were some foods that were very different that people were feeding their children. They also discovered that instead of scooping from the top of the pot, the broth, they were scooping down from the bottom where the nutrients were, which for the rest of the community was saved for the laborers in the family rather than for the children. And when it came to hand washing and routines for hygiene, they were doing some other very special things, just washing hands multiple times and feeding multiple times throughout the day instead of just one feeding. Same amount of rice, but a couple different servings. But the food was the key, right? And so this community, what we discovered here was that they were feeding their children sweet potato leaves, crab, and shrimp. Now, that sounds like a pretty decent diet to us maybe, but to the people in this community, this was considered peasant food. So there was a narrative that lived throughout the community that we just don't eat that here. We just don't do things that way here. But in fact, that actually was where the solution was. And once they discovered that, they started to think, well, how can we start to change the behaviors in this community so that more people can take on the behaviors that matter most? And so what they did was they invited the community for a dinner. And they said, hey, you know, the meal's free. This was people who experienced a ton of poverty, by the way. The meal's free, but please bring sweet potato leaves, shrimp, and crabs. And so the learning began. And as they came together collectively for this meal, they started sharing. Well, why are we eating this food? Oh, this is what we eat. And then the connections were made. Well, your kids are nourished. How is that? So, you know, what is happening here? How are you feeding your children these foods and they're nourished and our kids are not? And so the learning, the shared, the collective learning began. And it really tapped into the wisdom of the community that already had the answers. And then this idea of how do we spread that and share that? And so in this case, what they did was they matched families of nourished children and malnourished children side by side for a few weeks. And they went out to the patties together and they picked the shrimp and the crabs and they cooked beside each other. And they learned those practices. And to this day, over 2 million children are nourished in Vietnam because of these practices. But more importantly, because of a process of collective learning and collective sharing and tapping into the wisdom that already exists. So go ahead and put in the chat, just other than not maybe knowing where this is heading, go ahead and put in the chat, what might you be feeling from this story? What popped up? What emotion, what thought did you have around this story? Hungry, yeah. Optimism, right? That there's answers right now. Hope, again, this sense that while things may feel overwhelming, there is this sense of hope. There are solutions. Hope and inspiration. Thank you, Jennifer. So why would I tell you a story about malnourished children in Vietnam on the opening day of SEL Week? I know you're probably all wondering, and I think you might be able to make the connections already. You know, in many ways, I'm in hundreds of schools or have been in hundreds of schools throughout New Jersey and beyond. In many ways, I see
Yeah, we could do
we are
140, yeah.
that village, right? The way that village was struggling with malnourishment, I think right now we're struggling with this overwhelming sense of disengagement and motivation in schools and low morale. In every school I'm in, they're talking about HIV rates rising at unprecedented rates. And if we look at ourselves as that same struggling village, I think the answers are already within us. I think just like that village, there are people who are embodying SEL in such a way that they've nailed this problem. They're getting high engagement. They're getting highly motivated children in their classrooms because they've figured out the solutions that really continue for so many of us that are still stumbling on those solutions. And I think just like Jerry and Monique, we look at the problem through a new lens. We look not at how big and overwhelming this problem is because, yeah, this can feel overwhelming, the current state that we're in education. And yet I believe fully 100%, and in every school I'm proven this is true, that there are people, many of you probably on this call right now, who have figured out the solutions. You have figured out the answers that continue to confound others when it comes to how do we engage kids in meaningful ways? How do we set the conditions and the containers and the classrooms where young people can show up fully in their identities and feel empowered to co-create our classrooms and be a part of that shared learning journey with each other? And so today I want to connect what I know about the science and psychology of mattering at the core of how we do this. And here's the thing, if we get SEL right, and when I mean SEL right, I mean the way that we engage and embody the essence of SEL. If we get it right, the outcome is a profound sense that young people and adults feel like they do matter and feel a high sense of mattering and belonging. And today we're going to differentiate between what is the difference here between diversity and inclusion and belonging and mattering, because they are all very uniquely different and they are at the core of the story I just shared and of our path forward in education, rooted in the practices of SEL. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you now. And let me just move this little panel over here. Okay, great. And present. Here we are. Okay. So I just shared with you this story of Vietnam. We started to feel this sense of hope and optimism. And then I shared with you this challenge that we're facing, not only an epidemic of loneliness and isolation, but mental health and disengagement. And all of these things are wreaking havoc in the classroom and on children's learning and on their ability to connect and show up fully. And I know that the answers are actually quite simple, just like in Vietnam. And I know you know this too. But I think there's this one question that is really the epicenter of this conversation of how do we move past these struggles and these challenges? What are the people doing that are having great success, or students that are having great success despite the obstacles that we're facing right now? This question, what if this one question, do I matter, changes everything? Do we matter to others is an essential universal need that every single human being really wants to know. And when we know more about this idea around the psychology and science of mattering, this question reliably predicts our mental health, or what I'd like to say as a clinician is our brain health, because we're really talking about an organ, right? This psychological construct of mattering uniquely predicts and displays our risks for depression, suicide, anxiety, even loneliness. And so this universal need to feel significant in the eyes of other people, when people feel seen and heard and valued, it starts to form a vital part of their self-concept, the way they see themselves in the world, to have this sense that they matter. And it's when you have this, when you feel like you matter to people in your school, the students in your classroom, in your community at large, in your families, it sets the foundation for us to be resilient, to be engaged, to be person-centered. And it's highly protective against other adversities that we face. And when we don't have it, I've seen this over and over again as an educator, as an adult in my own life, right? Where mattering has happened or not happened in my life. It's that when we don't feel like we have this sense of mattering, it's the root of reckless suffering. And I think we've all seen this before. There's an African proverb and it says, "The child not embraced by the community will burn it down to feel its heat." Let me say that again. The child not embraced by the community will burn it down to feel its heat. And I think we've seen this, right? Not only are kids burning themselves down, but they may burn everything around them down when they don't feel this deep sense of belonging and mattering. And it's not only true for kiddos, right? Everything I do is really like, the same I say for kiddos is the same I say for adults, because we've seen adults do this as well. And so how then do we start to make mattering the mission of how we engage people, and by using what we know about SEL to set the containers and the conditions for mattering to happen? Well, I think the first thing that is essential to making sure that we understand and grapple with this idea of mattering is to differentiate between the other things that might be overlapping with this idea, or our belief around what mattering is. So let's just start with diversity, right? Now, diversity, by definition today, we'll just say diversity is the presence of difference. On this call right now, there's lots of differences with the people who are coming to the table. Now, that doesn't mean that it translates to inclusion, because inclusion is this intentionality, right? So where mattering is just the presence of differences, inclusion is this intention to really make space for inclusion to be possible. But inclusion then doesn't equal belonging, because while I could be intentional and set an intention, sometimes my impact doesn't match. And so not everyone may leave feeling that sense that they belong through my efforts of inclusion. Although we would like to think that, we know that intention doesn't always match impact. So in that sense, inclusion doesn't equal belonging. Belonging is this sense that you feel connected to. You feel like you fit. There's like this affiliation and this connectedness with. And then in that sense, we'll go one step further. Belonging doesn't equal mattering. Because if belonging is about fit, if belonging is about connectedness, if belonging is about affiliation, then mattering is really about significance. And when we think about significance, it's different than what we think about for belonging. Significance answers the question, am I important to people here? Do people pay attention to me here? Would I be missed if I weren't here anymore? If I went to a different school? Do people listen to my ideas? Do people care about me here? And lastly, am I a contribution? Do people depend on me here? And when I think about getting SEL right, like moving from this place that SEL is something different or separate than what we've always ever done as educators, if we get it right, that SEL is who we are and how we create engagement and how we create the conditions for belonging and mattering to happen, mattering is the direct output of how we get SEL right in schools. And that's so exciting to me because while, again, the problems that we're facing seem overwhelming, the answers are here. The solutions are low-hanging fruit. We create the conditions for people to feel this sense of belonging and mattering through intention. And so when we think about this science and psychology of mattering, it actually goes a step further with understanding that in the absence of these positive experiences where we might not feel like we matter, but maybe we belong, there's another degree that people experience that is responsible for quite a bit of suffering. And in the science, what we know, Gordon Flett is the author of a book, The Psychology of Mattering. And he terms this phrase anti-mattering. And that's when someone or something is actively acting to make your life not matter. And I can't help but think of the young people in schools right now who feel like the policies and the debates about identity are contributing to this sense that people are actively acting to make my life not matter. And so when I think about this, I think, wow, this is easy to solve for, right? When we can see the humanity in each other, when we can help people and young people shape their identities in a healthy way and celebrate all that they bring to the table in the fullness of who they are. When we can do this, we solve for this anti-mattering. And I think it's so important that we know the difference and know then that there are actions that we can take to shift the tide. So for me, mattering is a must. It's not a maybe. If we're going to get SEL right, we're going to make sure that mattering is the output, is the thing that young people leave us with. We really can't sustain our schools with excellence without this piece, without the practices, without the understanding of how vital mattering is to young people's core concept and identity. And so if I were to put a recipe together, a recipe of what the ingredients would be for mattering to happen, I would say that these couple of ingredients would be necessary. The first is that we need to help people feel fast, this sense that they are seen. And when I think about feeling seen, this is much more than this visible kind of the presence of our differences or the presence of our unique experiences and perspectives and talents of each person, just like this visible seeing, but to really kind of to see each other in the humanity, the fullness of our humanity, of who we are and where we've been, and believe people for their journeys and their experiences. And what stands in the way of this is bias that erodes our ability to see others as a contribution, to see others in the fullness of what they bring to the table. Being seen is about the lived experience of being acknowledged and validated and appreciated for who we are as unique individuals, and not only accepted for who we are and the parts of us that are quirky and different, but expected to bring that fullness of who we are to the table. When we reserve the right, this is a quote by Brene Brown, she talks about when we reserve the right for those with the most privileged identities to bring their whole selves to the table without fear of exclusion or discrimination, we miss out on the workplace and the homes and the schools of our communities when we don't reserve that right for everyone. So how do we do this? How do we help young people feel seen? Well, lots of the SEL practices that we have in place for check-ins and emotionally like making sure that we're checking in with students, but also seeing, not only those things that are challenges, but our strengths as well, right? So not only just seeing sometimes the behaviors that show up as difficult, but seeing beyond those. Where is this student a contribution? What is their incredible skill or talent that nobody else has? Because if you believe that each one of us has that inside of us, then our job is to find that, to seek it out, and to bring that into light for every single child. When I'm in schools and I'm working with adults, because I think we're remiss if we don't talk about SEL as a whole entire approach for engaging adults as well. When I am working with schools and teachers, this is one of the top things that they'll say helps them feel seen, is when their colleagues check in with them and follow up after a conversation. These really simple practices, right? Again, this low-hanging fruit. Feeling seen happens in these small acts of acknowledgement, of kindness, of compassion, of empathy. This is what SEL is. The next ingredient that I would say, well, before that, just a little inspiring perspective. What if we could see others in such a way that they love to exist? That the wholeness of who we are shows up because we see each other in this deep, deep, deep sense of connectedness. The next ingredient would then be to feel heard. As part of the recipe for feeling like we matter is this sense that beyond our words, more deeply than just kind of audibly being heard, that we have this lived experience of being understood for our thoughts, for our feelings, for our ideas, for our shared experiences. Being heard is essential to trust and collaboration, and it's especially important for the voices of those who've been historically silenced and historically marginalized and unrepresented. Mia Birdsong is an author, and she uses this word that I think is so wonderful, instead of using minorities or marginalized people, but these folks with underestimated identities. Our BIPOC folks, our LGBTQ folks, our folks with disabilities, our Indigenous folks, our Latinx folks, on and on and on. How do we make sure that we are intentional about creating a bigger pool of solutions by inviting all voices to the table? And not only inviting voices to the table, but expecting that all voices should be heard and will be heard. And so how do we do this? We really use the practices of self-regulation to pause, to practice really listening to people deeply without the intention to respond, but to really hold space for people, for their ideas and their thoughts and their opinions to be heard. To have points of view and conversations that are considered. When I think of, being asked to have this conversation around SEL, around inclusion and belonging, I think there's this unique experience of people whose identities are underestimated, according to Mia Birdsong, that there's this sometimes shared experience of part of your identity has you stand out, and at the same exact time makes you feel invisible. And so this shared experience of feeling both that you stand out because of parts of your identity and are invisible at the same time is something difficult and challenging. Where is the place for my voice? Where is the place for me to be seen and visible? And where do our ideas become visible? The things that we're doing right now that are helping solve some of the ills and challenges we're having in education, who holds some of the answers to that are unexpecting people with solutions? And how do we make space for those ideas and thoughts to become visible? What would happen if we listen to others in such a way that they love to speak? Now, if you've caught on, that's the saying behind me. And it inspired me to think about, being seen and heard and valued through this lens. So the next one, I already kind of led to it, is this idea that if we were really going to make mattering happen, then folks need to feel valued. And valued here is two-pronged. It's not just this sense that you're valuable to me, but that you offer value to others. And so when we think about feeling valued, it goes beyond these material rewards or recognition. It's in the lived experience of being acknowledged and appreciated and respected for your inherent worth and dignity as a human being. And I'm curious if we can hold a vision for education that is expansive in ways that really prioritizes these experiences where young people have an opportunity to be a contribution, where we can have these shared experiences of learning and values. And we start to focus on not only our well-being, but the collective well-being. This idea that I'm valued and I'm valuable to others, that others depend on me. Mattering is centered around this idea of being valued and adding value. And here's the best part about it. It's reciprocal. When we have the opportunities to give back to others, to contribute to others, to be a contribution, it comes back to us. And so there's this reciprocal relationship. And when I think about getting SEL right, it's in the classrooms that, just by the definition of SEL, right, is empowering young people and adults to co-create thriving schools and to contribute to their safe and healthy and just communities. This is that place that value and contribution happens. And it cannot happen without first feeling seen and feeling heard. When I value others, I know my contributions make a difference. I play a part in the bigger picture of the well-being of my school and my classroom and my community. I feel more empowered and more motivated. And when we think about solving for this disengagement and the lack of motivation, I think the answers are through this pathway, right? Of using everything we know about SEL embodied and in practice explicitly to create the sense that young people and adults feel like they are seen, that they are heard, that they are valued, and ultimately that they matter. So can we imagine a vision for school moving forward that values others in such a way that they love to be a contribution? So I want you to think right now about some of the things that might be popping up for you. Please share in the chat how it is that you feel seen, heard, or valued. What are the things, what are the actions that need to happen for that to be possible for you? So if you're willing, go ahead and put up in the chat, what makes you feel seen? What makes you feel heard? What makes you feel valued? Yeah, being greeted warmly by name and your name being said correctly. Absolutely. When people notice me, when they greet me, when they smile at me. Thanks, Andrea. When people ask for my opinion, right? When I feel like I can contribute to you, I have something valuable to offer you, and I'm asked about that. Yeah, absolutely. And across the board, in every school I've ever been in to do this work, these are the responses and the answers that we get. I said, feeling seen by check-ins and things like that was some of the top ways that educators feel like they are seen. The very number one thing across the board that educators said what helps them to feel like they matter is being listened to. That this idea that people are actually like listening and following up. Thanks, Luz, eye contact and full attention. Wonderful. So I want to share a framework with you right now on based on some of the research around mattering and belonging. I created this idea around social significance scale, and it was really inspired by the restorative practices work and that if you've ever seen the social discipline window. And I started to think about the experiences in the differences between belonging and mattering. And so if we were to look at this box, this window that's right in front of us right now, you have belonging across the bottom, and we go from low to high sense of belonging. And then along the left side, you see mattering and the experience going from low to high. In this bottom left box where we see low mattering and low belonging, I call this the not box. And I call this the not box because when people have a low sense of belonging and a low sense of mattering, we're not productive. We're not engaged. We're not motivated. In fact, these are the kiddos and the adults that might not even be showing up to school. When I think over to the right, this high sense of belonging and the low sense of mattering, that bottom right box, I think of this as the inbox. This is where people fit in. They feel connected to. They have friends. And with kiddos, this happens peer to peer. With adults, it happens colleague to colleague. This is where we might have some productive output, but there's this gap missing between I fit in and I belong, but I don't necessarily feel like people are listening to me or my ideas are taken and considered, which is that gap between mattering and belonging. And then that top left box, that high sense of mattering, that low sense of belonging, I call that the out box. And this is where people feel like they're important, they're significant, they matter, but they're disconnected. And so maybe there's, groups and cohorts of people within our schools that fit into this box. Maybe certain identities of students, these high-performing kiddos that maybe feel like they matter, but maybe they feel disconnected. Or I think a lot about leaders and how leaders find themselves in this out box, a high degree of mattering, but this low sense of belonging. And then the last box is this with box. And this idea that we're not necessarily in schools trying to manage those who fit in or those who stand out or are on the outs, but to move people faster and more towards this with box, that we're in this together, that we win with each other. This idea that our collective kind of contributions make the whole better. And this is the essence of what SEL is. This is the essence of how we make SEL happen in classrooms beyond this checkbox of things that I might have done or a training that I went to. It's moving people together with each other and creating the conditions for that to be possible. So I want to share, and I'm going to stop share here for a second. And I want to go back to this story of Vietnam. And I want us to think about right now the comparisons between what happened in Vietnam and where we find ourselves right now. In Vietnam, there was this narrative that happened that was consistent across the community, that we just don't do that that here. We don't feed our children those foods. Those are not the things that we eat. And I'm curious from your perspective, if you would be willing to put up in the chat, what are some of those narratives as it pertains to SEL that are standing in the way of us moving forward with intention and embodiment of SEL? I'll give you one example. SEL is just one more thing on my plate, right? What are the narratives that are standing in our way of finding the solutions, the positive deviants who are doing and making SEL happen in their classrooms, in their schools, with better outcomes than others, despite the challenges, having same access and the same resources? There are some narratives that are standing in the way. Yeah, we don't have the time to do this. We don't have the support to do this. Yeah. Teachers are not therapists. Yes. And do we need to be therapists to do any of the things we just talked about? No. We need a pathway forward for engaging people with real intentional and meaning. Yeah, there's generational leadership differences. There are some ineffective leadership practices that are standing in the way of SEL being in its full capacity in our schools. And yet, despite these narratives that stand in the way, and just like in Vietnam, there's solutions right now. There are people right now who have figured it out, despite the ineffective leadership strategies, despite this idea that it's the parents' job, that we're here to teach, that this is separate from what we've always ever done with kiddos, that, despite that, oh, there's no time for this, there are people right this moment who have figured out the answers. And I want to invite us to start looking at this problem through this lens that Jerry and Monique had. I want us to start to think about, what if we put our attention on those who have seemed to kind of crush this already, and we start to expand what they are doing in each of their particular schools? Because just like in Vietnam, every single school has its own, and every village had its own unique identity. What works in one school is going to be different than what works in another school. Our pathway forward is really through this idea and this curiosity of positive deviants that are among us. Who are these people? How are they getting better engagement? How are they using the core components and practices of SEL to get better outcomes with their students, despite having the same challenges? And then when we figure that out, the way that we move that innovation forward is not to send a newsletter or a PowerPoint with some bulleted best practices, but to engage each other in this practice of discovery and shared learning. So could you imagine being a teacher that's been given some time to go and observe another teacher's classroom down the hallway who's doing things incredibly well and getting better outcomes? That narrative that, oh, we don't do that here. Or worse yet, our union says we can't go into each other's classrooms. This is real. And those are actually in the way of the solutions, because the solutions are within us. We have them. They're being enacted every day. People are getting, incredible outcomes with students. And they're right amongst us. They're not outside of us. This idea that we win with each other is the way that we kind of spread this innovation through our schools. As we discover who it is that's doing something different, we really discover not who they are, because it's not about the person or necessarily what they're doing. It's how they're doing it. If we go back to that idea, that story about Vietnam, it wasn't that they were, they all had the same rice. They all were making this broth style meal, but some families were scooping from the bottom rather than scooping from the top. It was the how that they fed children. How are we feeding children in such a way that we can use SEL as the vehicle to make mattering something that all children leave our doors with and go out into the world contributing from this beautiful place? And so I want to share this story real quick with you about Nasruddin. And Nasruddin is I'm going to flip back to the screen just in case you like a visual like me. But Nasruddin is a notorious smuggler, and he's common in fables of Middle Eastern folklore. And in this story in particular, Nasruddin, every day he comes to the border with this trail of donkeys, saddlebags filled with hay. And the border patrol, they search tirelessly to find the narcotics that they assume are what Nasruddin is, moving over the border back and forth, that's contributing to his steady growth in wealth. And so they search effortlessly, they search tirelessly, they can never find it. And so he continues day after day with this trail of donkeys and these saddlebags filled with hay until he retires, and he is in a tea house and happens to be there at the same time that an old retired border patrol officer is also there. And so the border patrol officer is so curious after all these years. He approaches Nasruddin and he says, we're not a threat to each other anymore. You have to tell me, what is it that you have done? What was it that you were bringing back and forth over the border that was contributing to your wealth all these years? And Nasruddin sits back in his chair and he takes a sip of his tea and he responds, donkeys. And when we think of this story, I hope it makes you think that the answers are right in front of us. The answers to the challenges that we're seeing and that we're facing in education are right there. They're hidden in plain sight. And our role on this SEL week and this SEL day is to not let this end in one day, to keep our curiosity alive so that all children can grow and develop their healthy identities, and that they can acquire the skills and the knowledge and the attitudes to manage their emotions and develop healthy ways. If you're not familiar with the definition, I'm getting right to it, right? This definition that young people can achieve their personal and collective goals and feel and show empathy for others through this idea of creating a sense that young people feel like they matter, that they can build these deep relationships and help make responsible and caring decisions in their life through this sense that I matter, and that my mattering is internal, that my value is internal. And in such a way that when we do this, when we allow for new voices and new ideas and new solutions to emerge from this place, we do create that advancement and equity and excellence in our classrooms. And when, just like in the villages of Vietnam, they went to the families and they built deep relationships to discover what was their wisdom that they were getting their children to be nourished. It was through this authentic, partnership with families. And that's exactly what we need in this moment, this authentic tapping into the wisdom of the families whose children are seemingly succeeding through these challenging and difficult times. This authentic relationship with teachers and each other to discover these practices that are hidden in plain sight, and helping our children to get this sense that we are in this together, that we win with each other. When we create classrooms rooted in SEL that allows children to show up and contribute and move forward in their life, contributing to their communities and the world at large. And so I hope that today you are feeling inspired and energized by our steps forward to move SEL into the next dimension and have it rooted in this sense that we value people mattering, feeling seen, feeling heard, feeling valued. And I couldn't be happier again to be here today. I know we wanted to open up some time for questions. So thank you so much. And let's have a conversation. Let's unpack some things that we heard today. Two messages, let's see. Yeah, so thanking you all for bringing these meetings together for us to learn. We all have to be there for our children, no matter the roles they need, our nurturing and care, and the sense of belonging in our presence. Anybody have any questions? And you can come off of mute. I'd love to hear from you and talk to you a little bit. Mattering gives SEL its why. I love that, Dr. Elias. So we have about 51 people still riding with us. Go ahead and put up in the chat like one big idea that you're taking away from the kickoff of SEL, this idea, this messaging that we shared today. That's one big idea that you're taking away with you. Olivia, thanks for the question. How did you come up with the concept of mattering? Like so many other things in my life as a therapist, there were so many things I was already doing. And then I found the research that validated the things that I always had done. And that was my experience with SEL as well. Like when I heard about SEL, I looked back and thought, oh, SEL is what I've always been doing. It was something that, I always did as an educator. And then SEL all of a sudden became a name that made it explicit. And for me, mattering was the same way. The work I do around trauma and trauma-informed care, and even as a therapist, I see mattering at the root of so many things that people come to the therapeutic session with. And it's something I've always done, rooted in all the work I've always ever done. And then I found the research that supported it. And so for me, this has been a lifetime of work around mattering, and also enthralled in a positive way that there is research and science behind what many of us have always been doing. Okay, let's see what else is in the chat. I love hearing voices. So if you're willing or courageous to jump on and chat, that would be wonderful. Let's see. Jennifer, the best webinar I've attended. Excellent. Thank you so much. Social significance scale, great visual. Thank you so much, Jill. I think it's really compelling, this idea. Yeah, I love it. I'm curious about the concept of underestimated identity. Can you say more about that? So I got that term coined by Mia Birdsong, and she wrote, she's an author. And so I would have you check out Mia Birdsong's work. Underestimated identities is not my language, but she's talking about the experience of marginalized or underserved or underprivileged people, and changing that language in such a way that it puts, I think, my interpretation, it puts the onus not on the person with the identity as this sense of lack, but on those who look at people through a lens of their identities that is underestimated. That's maybe the best way that I could explain it. Evelyn, it was wonderful. I totally agree with everything. Just aim to make every kid come in contact with feel valued and worthy. And it happens in small, very small moments. Yeah. Yeah, any words to help a child who is stuck in I'm stupid, I suck, and help them break through and get them talking? I talk a lot when I do work around like mental health and brain health and well-being, around the narratives that we digest. And so I wonder, I become curious when I hear kids talking about themselves like that, where they might have heard those messages. And then how do we counteract those messages by sending messages that are really counterintuitive to that, but in a really meaningful way. So when I think about this and I think of restorative practices, comes to mind affirmative language. Not just saying like good job, but really pinpointing the thing that that kiddo is doing that directly connects that worth and that message of worth that you're trying to give to them to their behavior. Because then they have an idea of like, oh, what do I need to do, or how do I act that helps me show up and feel like I am worthy and valuable. I think it's an inside job, and unfortunately, many kiddos have been fed a narrative that they might not be lovable or they may not be worthy. And so anything that we can do to change that, but really directly connect it to aspects about them, but not superficial, right? Really things that can help them continue to show up and behave and not behave, but show up and take action in such a way that they feel valued and worthy, if that makes sense. Realizing my glasses, I might need a stronger prescription than trying to look in the chat. Solutions are there.
Hi, I have a question about positive deviance.
Yeah. Let's do it.
Would you talk more about that?
Sure. Oh, I could. How long do you have? So, in 2008, I was invited to be a part of, in my district, I was invited to be a part of a cohort that was learning and being trained in positive deviance. It was an effort by then Willa Spicer, if we could remember and go back to I think it was Willa Spicer days, or maybe it was a commissioner that might have been right around that time. So anyway, we had the opportunity to be the first application of positive deviance in schools, in education, to solve for gang involvement and low attendance and high chronic absenteeism, things like that, chronic tardies. And as schools happened, we had a lot of changes in administration, and even though we were trained, we weren't able to see it all the way out. I just told you the story about Vietnam. But what happened for me was, having learned those steps, it was the first time in my career that I felt so hopeful about change. I felt so positive and that things were so possible. And so I carried those 4 steps. So if you heard them in the story, one was identify the problem and the solution that you're after. So the problem in Vietnam was malnourishment, and the solution was to improve the nourishment of kids throughout the village. The second step is identify if positive deviance exists. Are there people who right now are doing something uniquely different? And in Vietnam, yes. And in our schools, as I mentioned, yes, there are solutions right now. The third step is, once we discover their practices, right? The greeting at the door and the following up, or, in Vietnam, the feeding the sweet potato leaves and shrimp and crab, then how do we start to discover those practices, create some core 4 or 5 core things that can be done, and then share that. So the fourth step is shared learning opportunities. So it's not a PowerPoint or a newsletter or a faculty meeting from the top down. It's engaging those people with the answers in the process of discovery, finding out who their colleagues are that are making SEL really happen and crushing it. And then how do we teach each other in meaningful ways, shared learning, shared growth, shared innovation, to spread that so more of our colleagues can have those practices in their tool belt, in their tool belt. And so that's the work that I get to do with schools now, is take them on that journey of those 4 steps. And it's rooted in mattering, and it's rooted in all the practices of SEL. And we start to throw those narratives out that, we don't have time for it. Oh, but has somebody in this school found a way to move SEL forward in meaningful ways despite the challenge of time? Oh, yeah. Who are those people? And they start giving me names. And then we start, well, can we go see what they're doing? And then we go into their classrooms and we start to create those themes. And then we create opportunities that are meaningful and shared practice opportunities. So did you have a deeper question about it? Let me stop there.
No, I appreciate it. It's a concept I'd never heard of before, and now I'm digging and going down a rabbit hole. So thank you. I appreciate it.
It's a wonderful rabbit hole to go down, and this process to me is so powerful because of how much hope is embedded in it, and how we can really start to actualize SEL, right, by things that are happening right now. And it's got 30 years of global success. It's some of the most seemingly intractable problems.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Alisha, I want to thank you so much for this tremendously inspiring presentation. I think that every one of us is going to treasure getting the recording so that we can share it with just about everybody we know, so that they can get the message of hope and action that you gave us. The importance of mattering, how we can open up the doors of a school and not want every child to matter is hard to fathom. And so taking your inspiration, so much of this is being done already. There's nothing you've talked about that's impossible. And so thank you so much for kicking us off. And we look forward to your continued contributions and to sharing this wonderful talk with as many people as we can. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of the week.
And Alisha, thank you so much on behalf of everyone. It left me a little emotional hearing your message, just about the sense of hope and building on strengths, and that I could not even imagine a better kickoff to SEL week, if not SEL year, SEL every day for everyone, so that we all matter all the time. So in any case, thank you. So much appreciated. Sending you all sorts of positive energy.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I received that and send it back to each and every one of you.
All right. So thank you, everyone. And believe it or not, we're absolutely on time, which is like good. And so for those of you who are here, we do have another session starting at 12:45. If you'd like to hang out in between, we have a video of examples of some great SEL stuff schools are doing. So please, it's the same link. Please feel free to hang out. But 12:45, we're going to be hearing about SEL and special education from Kim Spagoni, which is such an important topic and very, very focused. But it's something that is just going to be great as well. So with that said, hope to see many of you in about 10 minutes. Enjoy the video show, and we'll see you soon. And have a wonderful week, those of you who can't join today. And hopefully you'll be able to join tomorrow and Wednesday and Thursday, and then celebrate on SEL Day. So I think that's it for the moment.